Welcome to our conversation about Metro Reimagined. I'm pleased to see all of you here. My name is Jessica Mefford-Miller. I'm our Executive Director here at Microtransit. Today we invited you here to share with you what we hope to be our near final version of Metro Reimagined, which is our blueprint for mobility across the St. Louis region. I'm going to go through a brief presentation and talk a little bit about the process for developing this plan for the new Metro Transit system. We invite your feedback. We're today beginning about a 3-month process of community engagement when we're seeking input into the plan before we finalize it and prepare for implementation about a year from now. Before we talk in detail about Metro Reimagined, I want to give you a little bit of a backdrop so that you can understand the context in which we're implementing a major change to our transit system here in the St. Louis region. Our priorities, which I'm calling our blueprint for change, 5 different functional areas that we're already engaged in here at Metro Transit. The first priority is creating a safer transit system. We're working with our law enforcement partners and within the Metro team to more strategically deploy law enforcement and public safety personnel to interface with customers and create a visible presence across our system. We're working to deliver tools, including an interoperable radio system, to make surveillance and communication more productive. We're also having a look at the design of our stations and system to create safer places. This includes things like considering the way people access our stations, the actual design of the stations. There's so much that you can do with design to create safer environments by minimizing barriers to sightlines, creating bright, comfortable, attractive spaces, and also activating those spaces so that there are more eyes and ears on the street and better connecting our system to surrounding developments. We are very proud of our 46 miles and 38 stations that are part of the MetroLink system. Some of those stations are 25 years old now and need a little work to bring them up to speed with modern technology. They also need to be better connected to surrounding development. The original MetroLink alignment, which we're very grateful for, was built in a freight corridor, so some of those stations feel a little disconnected from surrounding neighborhoods. Creating better connections will create a safer system as well. Metro Reimagined is the piece where we are reimagining mobility. The reason we began to think about the design of our system, number one, ridership is falling. We're seeing this trend nationwide for transit systems. People are choosing to travel in single occupancy vehicles, and we're seeing the cost of owning and operating a vehicle, especially here in the St. Louis region, fall with respect to wages. We're also seeing the emergence of the sharing economy, which presents not a competition for transit, but we see it as exciting opportunities to interface different mobility solutions within the construct of a multimodal mobility system. We're also hearing from our customers that some of our service isn't meeting their needs. We've got a wide gap in the productivity of our system across our 84 Metro bus routes and our MetroLink system. So we want to more closely align level of service with demand and the built characteristics of the communities we serve. We'll talk more about Metro Reimagined in detail. Within Metro, we're undergoing a renaissance called the Rider-centric revolution. We are shifting our decision-making, and that's everything from the way we design facilities to the way we support and communicate with our employees to create an explicit focus on our customers. Each employee is being trained to every day interface with our customers. For some of our employees, that might be an internal customer, if you're a mechanic, for example, or it might be an external customer if you're an operator or a frontline supervisor or security personnel. Each day I've asked them to say thank you 100 times to their coworkers and to their customers and create a sense of gratitude and service within our organization, all the way from our decisions on capital programs and budget projects to the delivery of service. We're engaging our employees in a conversation about how the service should be designed and delivered. We're empowering them to be part of that decision-making process. And finally, with all of these things, we're working to reposition the Metro brand. You'll see more of this later in 2019. We will undergo a rebranding initiative in the fall. That'll coincide with the launch of Metro Reimagined. You'll see new signage across the system that is intended to convey meaningful information to our customers and the public, create a brighter and bolder image for Metro Transit, make it easier for frequent users and non-users of the Metro system to understand our service and to make use of it on a regular basis. So let's go into a little bit of a deep dive on Metro Reimagined. Some of you are familiar with this project. We began in earnest in April of 2017. This project is being undertaken by the Metro team. We have an advisory committee consisting of a number of partners, and we engaged a consultant team called TMD that specializes on transit system redesign. We started with an in-depth analysis of our system productivity. Now every month we're looking at our ridership on a route basis, occasionally on a stop basis, to identify changes in service, changes in demand that might trigger a change in service level. But this was a really deep dive. We were looking at each route, each hour of the day, and each day type, like weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that really gave us meaningful information that we can use as we seek to match service levels with demand. We went to the public in fall of 2018 to present an overview of what we're going to do and ask for their input. Now, the number one thing that we heard from our customers is that more frequency is what they want. And that's true for transit customers nationwide. If you've got a route that gets you where you want to go, but it only comes every 40 minutes, it might not be an option for you, especially if you've got other options available. So where we've got demand, where we've got the built environment that is supportive of transit, we're working to deliver more frequency. And this really came out in the draft service plan. We came out in the spring of 18 with a draft of using input from the customers, but a lot of that research. Now what we want to do now is share a revised draft. The difference between the version in the spring and the one I'm going to share with you today is that this takes into account all of the very detailed community input we received. We received over 1,000 detailed comments from customers about how the proposed plan may impact them, pros and cons, and we've responded accordingly. Our intention is to finalize this version of the plan in early spring of 19 and march toward implementation in fall of 2019. So a much longer implementation window than a typical service change, but we need at a minimum 6 months between plan finalization and actual implementation. So the guiding principles of Metro Reimagined, this is explicitly part of that rider-centric revolution. We're focused on creating a meaningful customer experience, and that includes service that is efficient and attractive. Accessibility and equity are ingrained throughout this planning process. So when we're thinking about access to routes, one of the things that we changed, we heard a lot about, was communities where we have reasonable density, where the gaps between routes was a little bit too big for the community to tolerate in the last version. So you're seeing a little bit more coverage in this version. It does come at the expense of frequency because this plan is designed to be delivered within our existing resources. It's financially constrained. So it's a series of difficult decisions and trade-offs between frequency and coverage. So fundamentally, what we're trying to do is match our mobility markets to our solutions. St. Louis is a very diverse region. We have thriving suburban communities, a lot of dense residential communities and neighborhoods, both employment and residential density, as well as mixed-use neighborhoods. The service that we provide today via Metrobus, it's relatively uniform across the system. We mostly have 40-foot buses that are traveling 20, 30, 40, 60-minute intervals across the system. So what we're trying to do is to diversify the offering of services that we have to better match them to the mobility markets. Some of this change can be accomplished very quickly in fall of 2019 when we change the routes. Other pieces of the change will require a little time to implement, including changes in our vehicle replacement strategy, as well as building what we're calling community mobility hubs, and I'll share this with you here in a little while. The types of mobility solutions that we are proposing here are enhanced frequent service. So frequent service within transit is generally service that comes at least every 15 minutes. Right now on the street, we're still in our rush hour time frame, we only have 4 routes. That's Metrolink and 3 Metrobus routes that fit that enhanced frequent category. And 2 of those routes are going to become infrequent during the middle of the day today. We will change that to increase the number of frequent routes. Our supporting local routes are still the backbone of the system. This is the service that reaches into the communities in the nearly 600 square miles of Metro Transit service area. we're straightening out some of those supporting local routes so we can speed up travel time and trying to shift them to what we call a clock face frequency. Clock face is service that comes predictably every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and off-peak every 60 minutes. And I'll tell you, as a transit customer, it's really important to have this predictable cadence throughout the course of the day. It's the difference between not needing a schedule and having to look up your trip plan every time you use transit. I love knowing that my route will come at 9 after the hour and 39 after the hour, and I don't have to think about it. We're also going to be implementing new types of service. We're calling them community mobility solutions. These will be born out of partnerships with businesses, communities, neighborhood improvement districts, to cater to specific markets that have needs that might not be supportive of fixed route transit. So we've got service that just isn't as productive today as we would like it to be. In some instances, the density is relatively low and not likely to support fixed route. And in other places, trips are so short, like here in downtown St. Louis. We need last mile solutions to leverage the impact of our existing investment in Metrolink and the many local bus routes that converge on downtown, on our streets, and at our Civic Center Transit Center. But a route circulating around downtown that comes only every 20 minutes just isn't a productive solution for a lot of people. So we're proposing a different approach here today. Just to summarize the feedback that we've received, we talked to about 1,200 customers across our system. We did a number of pop-up sessions, and we're ready to do another series of pop-up sessions starting on Monday. These are opportunities at our transit centers and our Metrolink stations to interface with our customers as they continue on their daily trip, share information with them, and get their feedback. And we do that through a series of one-on-one conversations with Metro staff. So we will be out on the street, pounding the pavement for the next month, talking with our customers. We are also looking for opportunities to go to where people already are. That includes neighborhood association meetings or other kinds of civic meetings and events. If you've got an event or an organization you think we should talk to in the next few months about Metro Reimagined, please reach out to me, Jessica Gershman, or Courtney Sloger from Vector Communications, who is working with us on this project. We'd like to know about that. So those 1,000 comments I mentioned earlier, we went through all of them. We categorized them, and then we responded to the majority of the comments. And this plan is responsive to that. And again, the revision is responsive to our available resources. And so with more coverage came a little less frequency in some places. So this is the final draft network of Metro Reimagined. I'll go through each service tier in detail. It's hard to, I think, understand the system at an aggregate, but more frequent service is the principal building block. We'll have faster, more direct travel. So this came with a trade-off in coverage. Over the years, we have modified routes to deviate into business parks and employment centers so that we could provide a service. But as a result, every person on that deviation is delayed. And so with each of those, we call them deviations, we were literally calculating the benefit of that. How many people are actually using that destination or stop relative to the number of people who are actually on board the bus at that time. And so we made decisions on a case-by-case basis which deviations would remain in the system. Sometimes it makes sense. But if we need to deviate into shopping centers, into large residential developments, for example, that might mean we need to change the service profile for that destination. In some cases, we split off some of these smaller destinations from our core principal route so that we were not running a 15-minute frequency service through a shopping center with a 40 or a 60-foot bus. It just didn't quite make sense. So you'll see different route configurations. We also, with that clock face frequency, are deliberately designing more reliable connections. We're going to propose, or we are proposing, a series of relatively small-scale investments called community mobility hubs that are intended to facilitate on-street transfers and minimize out-of-direction travel for customers who must transfer. Here in the core of our service area, we do have, for the most part, a grid street structure, but our system has been designed to favor our transit centers and Metrolink connections, and that's very powerful for most but not all of the customers on the bus. For a customer who's going from South City and wants to travel to Southwest City, they might want to head north, get an on-street connection, and then head west, and that's most efficient for them. But we want to create places and spaces that are attractive and comfortable, where customers can have information. And ideally, we would like to work with all of you in the communities we serve to create a sense of place around those and orient businesses deliberately around those transit hubs. So it's thinking about transit-oriented development really at a smaller scale than development around light rail stations. Let's take a look at our tiers of service. This is our frequent network. So today where we have 3 routes that are 20-minute or better service all day long. In this plan, we propose having 13 routes that are at least 15 minutes during most of the day. Now, some of these routes in the last version were 15 minutes all day. Some of them will have 30-minute service in our current proposal in the midday and the late evening. But when most people are traveling, it's 15 minutes. These are principally our heavy north-south and east-west routes in the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County. They are routes like the 73 Carondelet, which travels from Civic Center Transit Center here in downtown all the way to South County Mall. That connects with our 74 Florissant at Civic Center and goes all the way to our North County Transit Center. So this means that we will have a strong north-south connection. Imagine in your mind a route that runs all the way from North County, connects at Civic Center, all the way to South County, that operates every 15 minutes. This is critically important because we have so much north-south mobility in the region. This is where we have dense concentrations of both employment and population. Some of these corridors are also, this frequent network is also overlapping with the proposed network for the North Side, South Side Metrolink corridor, a little bit different form, but putting enhanced frequency in those markets, intending to build and grow ridership as we consider future transit investments in the region. Other routes that are today our strongest routes that are getting increased frequency include our 95 Kings Highway, another north and south. Our 70 Grand, which is head and shoulders above the other routes, is getting additional frequency. It's our most frequent route today. It's going to be more frequent still. We will continue running 60-foot buses, our biggest vehicles on the Grand Corridor, though we're going to replace them in 2021 with battery electric 60-foot buses. Our 16 city limits, which runs approximately the perimeter of the western city of St. Louis, that's going to run 15 minutes most of the day, all day on the northern end. East-west routes include the 11 Chippewa, which runs across South City, 94 Page, the Natural Bridge. In the north, we have the 61 Chambers. This is a route that has just grown by leaps and bounds in the last 10 years or so. It connects today at our Riverview Transit Center in the east and our North Hanley Transit Center and Metrolink Station in the west. This is a route that has historically meandered through neighborhoods in northeast St. Louis County in the Glasgow Village neighborhood, for example. We're actually going to take the neighborhood piece of that route off. We're going to put local service in its place because we want to provide 15-minute frequency with a 40-foot bus all day, every day on the 61 Chambers. So we're expanding that frequent network, which today covers 30 route miles to 300 route miles. This is an investment that will impact currently over half of our customers on a daily basis, and I believe will grow ridership into the future. Our local network, this is explicitly designed to support that core frequent network as well as Metrolink. These routes all interface with the frequent network or Metrolink stations at transit centers or stations. This is really important for making efficient trips across the region, especially for customers who may have a relatively long distance commute, which is really endemic to the St. Louis metropolitan region. Most of these routes today operate every 40 minutes. We've streamlined them, and they will operate every 30 minutes. This will create dependable travel from early in the morning until late in the evening. One of the major changes that we've experienced in ridership in recent years includes a shift away from our historic peak period, that Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 kind of job cycle, to an increase in late night, midday, and weekend service. We're seeing our peak begin in many of our markets at about 2 p.m. on a weekday afternoon, and that really demands a more consistent and higher level of service. It also will help us attract non-work trips. Today, the majority of transit customers are traveling on Metro to get to work, And when we look at the total array of trip making in the region, the minority of trips, I think only about 15% of all trips are journeys to work, but the majority of transit trips are journeys to work. We want to continue to prioritize access to employment, but we want to make our service attractive for those other trips to get to shopping, healthcare, and recreation and other destinations throughout the region. This dependable, consistent service will help us do that. Finally, we have a suite of express routes. Today we operate express routes. These will continue to be downtown-oriented, peak period only, weekday trips that primarily operate on highways. We've altered some of the paths a little bit so that some of these routes are providing more direct connections to employment centers outside of downtown, including Central West End and the Cortex District. And we revised these routes in large part based on feedback from the customers who are using them today. And finally, this is our array of community mobility solutions. I'll show you where we're working and then tell you what we're doing there. We have identified through just kind of these polygons or shapes on the screen and some lines, markets where we think something called microtransit, which is a dynamic demand responsive service, could work. Our current service is all fixed route. It means it operates on a regular path. It doesn't deviate from that path, and a regular schedule that hopefully it doesn't deviate from. These services, rather, would be more responsive to consumers and use what we call dynamic dispatching, same kind of tech you're using when you're driving around in your car and using Google Maps to find the optimal route to get to your destination. We're working with a company called Transloc right now. They are a tech provider in the microtransit industry. We've shared the tremendous amount of data with them that we use to create this plan, and they're modeling 3 different market areas for us. That includes downtown St. Louis right here, Central West End, and the Cortex District, and then this Hazelwood industrial area you'll see in northwest St. Louis County. What we've asked them to do is take a look at demand within those markets, help us understand the potential for ridership on a microtransit pilot, as well as the level of service. So how many vehicles and at what times of day would we need to deploy to make that service work? Our intention when we finish this modeling, which is taking place right now and will wrap up this fall, is to deploy pilot projects in these areas where we try out a microtransit solution. By the time we implement the route changes in a year, we'd like to be able to peel back some or all of the fixed route service in those markets and replace it with a demand responsive solution. Let me give you an example of how that might work. If we take the Hazelwood industrial area, and we're working with the employers through the City of Hazelwood's economic development team, we've collected surveys of employees, where they're coming from, what time they're getting there. We've talked with the employers about their needs and some of the challenges they face with recruiting employees to their firms. So the service that we provide could be circulation within the Hazelwood Industrial District. There are a lot of jobs there, but it is very low density. There is not much pedestrian infrastructure like sidewalks or lighting. Many of these shifts operate in such that customers are out early in the morning or late at night when it's dark. And so using fixed route transit and walking a long distance isn't a great option for many of them. Right now, Amazon has a location on Hazelwood Industrial Court, and they're actually using a charter service to shuttle people from the nearest bus stop to get them to the front door of their buildings. It's a short distance, but it's not walkable for a lot of people. So we'd like to replace that fixed route service with a flexible option that provides connections to our nearest hub. In the case of Hazelwood, that would likely be our North Hanley Transit Center. We'll also work with those employers to identify mobility solutions for shifts that may end or begin outside of our normal span of service. This is a challenge we face. If you need to be at work at 5 o'clock in the morning, for example, or if you get off work at 1 o'clock in the morning, our existing system likely cannot accommodate you, and we can't expand the span of service across our entire system without reducing a lot of what we've proposed here. So what we would rather do, rather than waking up the whole system in our operation, is deploy service strategically just where it's needed so that people can get to those jobs. Here in downtown, microtransit would look different. Here we would be providing access to work. So think about the person who goes to work at a hotel and needs to arrive at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. The buses operate a little less frequently, and right now they're getting there on our number 99 downtown trolley, which is a fixed route. In the same market, we have tourists, of course, and visitors of the St. Louis region. We have downtown employees, people like me, who might want to travel over the course of your business day to lunch or to meetings using transit, maybe to destinations that are a little outside of the reach of Metrolink. Think about someone coming from Busch Stadium to go have dinner on the Wash Ave corridor. Now, they could take Metrolink from Stadium to our convention center station, but maybe they want to go to 14th and Washington. It's a little bit further. So consider a microtransit solution that would allow those consumers to hail service using either a smartphone or making a telephone call to one of our dispatch centers to summon that service. Now, the service wouldn't be point-to-point precisely. Rather, we envision developing community mobility zones. Think of it like a bus stop zone that you'd have throughout downtown. But we would need to create these zones where someone could get a bus or a microtransit solution, maybe an Uber, a bike share. Maybe we could corral some of those scooters throughout downtown within these zones. And having those zones really helps improve the efficiency of that dynamic dispatch. So oftentimes, if you know this, if you used Uber, they'll say, well, just meet me around the corner at this destination, especially with one-way streets. And we have a little construction from time to time, here in downtown. So creating those clear nodes where people can access the service and also get information about how they can get that service and what it is will really enhance the mobility of downtown, and we don't view it as a competitor to Metrolink, to Metrobus. We view it as a complement and a trip extender to our existing services. Our intention or our desire is to be able to replace our existing fixed route, the number 99 downtown trolley, with this innovative mobility solution for the same or lower cost. And that's really the challenge to us and to the firms that we're working with, is to come up with solutions that hopefully spend less but not more money. Now, these community mobility solutions are very attractive, so we've got to limit where we put them. We won't be putting microtransit throughout our service area. The cost to provide this individual level service would become so high that we would quickly exceed our available resources. So we've got to be strategic about thinking where we can reasonably support a fixed route, how we can make that fixed route most attractive, and where we can't, what kind of solution we can implement, and how we can effectively interface those solutions so that the customer sees a seamless mobility network that allows them to choose on a day-to-day basis, depending on the weather or where they have to go in a given day, whether they're using Metrobus, Metrolink, Metro Community Mobility, bike share, car share, or scooter, or hopefully walking on a sunny day. So some of the benefits of this plan approach by the numbers. Of course, higher frequency means overall less travel times. The service is purpose-driven, so that means we're really looking at when people travel and where people travel. One of the major shifts that we've made in this network plan, we've heard from a lot of customers, they need more service on Sundays. This is a common refrain from employers, especially within the service and healthcare industries. Today, we operate a service tempo that's about a level 5 on a weekday, level 3 on a Saturday, and a level 2 on a Sunday. This plan proposes the identical service plan on a Saturday and on a Sunday. That's how we operate Metrolink today. So by improving that Sunday service, we'll be able to get people to destinations like Mercy South or St. Anthony's Hospital, as we've long known it. Today, we don't have Sunday service there, and it's a major challenge for that community to attract employees and for people who live within that market to get places on a Sunday. The service is easier to understand. That clock face frequency and clearly defined route paths will take some of the ambiguity out of using transit. We're also working to deliver customer-focused amenities. I'll talk about those in just a moment. But by the numbers, today for our existing customers, about 48,000 have access to frequent service. This is people riding today, not including those riders we hope to attract or bring back to the Metro system. This proposal will deliver frequent service to over 69,000 customers. That's a significant improvement, and especially considering that we're accomplishing this within our existing resources. When we look at where people live, the expanded footprint into residential communities of fixed route service is huge. I want this fixed route network to change our conversations about land use planning. When we think about affordable housing, we should be focused on that frequent network. That's Metrolink and those frequent bus routes. And this 300 miles really gives us something to work with. And I think together we can begin to shift this conversation and create some more strategic decisions between where people live and work and where we've got a frequent network. By the numbers, jobs, about 100,000 more jobs will be accessible via the frequent network than they are today. But I think from in my mind, the real impact is within these residential communities. So rider impacts. There are impacts to our existing customers that will be outside of our current coverage for fixed route service. So by the numbers, within a half a mile, 608 of our average daily boardings that are within a half mile of our service today would be outside of that service. So that is still 99.3% of our existing customers would be served by that half mile boundary. So this impact went down in between the spring network and the network I'm sharing with you today because we added coverage back in. Now, paratransit, our call-a-ride service, fundamentally goes where fixed route service does. Paratransit is mandated to be, we have to provide it at least within 3/4 of a mile of our fixed route service. There are a number of gaps or donut hole areas you'll see on that map historically, and we will continue moving forward to fill in those gaps in our fixed route network with what we call our call-a-ride service area. And then we can also make policy decisions, and I anticipate that we will, to include those current customers who are not inside the new call-a-ride service area that are within it today. So some impacts, pretty minimal relative to the benefits, I think. So implementing this, as we begin to gear up our machine to make this transition, we really view Metro as being a convener and a broker of mobility services, working in concert with employers, economic development entities, and the communities we serve. Some of this service will continue, most of it will continue to be directly operated by Metro, Metrobus, and Metrolink. Some of it we won't directly operate. Rather, we would broker and subcontract that to other providers, especially those community mobility solutions that might not be operating all day, every day, and certainly don't require the kind of heavy-duty equipment that we pride ourselves on maintaining and operating within Microtransit. So we have been building and will continue to build relationships with partners and employers to design and deploy these services. We worked in concert with Downtown Inc. last year for their microtransit pilot in downtown St. Louis. We anticipate that Downtown Inc., the city of St. Louis, and other businesses will be key partners as we embark on a microtransit pilot here within downtown. I mentioned Hazelwood and those employers. We've always talked with the businesses and communities we serve. This is a much deeper dive and more explicit focus on crafting the service together and possibly working together to deploy the service. We're also talking with our nonprofit and philanthropic community, which is strong here in the St. Louis region, and we'd like to do a better job of leveraging those relationships to deliver effective and purpose-driven service. And finally, I know a number of you work on the infrastructure side, so we would like to work with you on infrastructure improvements to the system so that we can create transit-supportive communities. Here at Metro Transit, we can deliver or broker the mobility solutions, but we rely on all of you to help build an environment that is supportive of transit and other modes. One of those strategies is what we're calling community mobility hubs. The dots on the map, the red dots are our existing hubs. Most of them are Metrolink stations, others are transit centers. The blue and yellow dots are places that don't exist, not in a formal way yet. They're major intersections where we envision routes interfacing, facilitating on-street transfers between regularly scheduled service, as well as some community mobility solutions. That could be the bike share, the scooter share, or the Uber hub that someone clearly knows and understands. You can make a lot of these multimodal trips in the St. Louis region today. You could Uber or Lyft to a Metrobus stop or a Metrolink station. I don't think that we have conceptualized that for consumers in such a way that they understand it's very easy to do. There are apps out there, in fact, like Transit, that allow you to make and plan a multimodal trip in one interface. We'd like to take that to the next level by bringing all of these modes together, including trip planning and fare payment within a single interface. But we also need some infrastructure so that there is a there. Even as we proceed down this path and integrate the sharing economy more into our system, we still need places and spaces for people to congregate and get information and to interact with each other, because after all, what we do is serve communities. So we certainly don't want to take the community out of the mobility equation. These community mobility hubs would be like enhanced bus stops where we really activate the curb space and provide different uses for it. So it's a corral for maybe your bikes and your scooters and your Ubers. You have amenities, and ideally, they're well situated with respect to businesses. So maybe while you wait, if you've got a few minutes, you can run into a drugstore or a business nearby, and it's designed such that the transit stop and that mobility hub is welcomed into the business, and there's a clear and accessible path. We don't have that today in a lot of the communities we serve. We can get there without a lot of heavy lifting and funding. You'll also begin to see some changes in our fleet. So we're working on this right now. I'm very excited about bringing some smaller buses into our market on some of those local routes, those green routes that we talked about earlier that serve lower density areas that don't carry a lot of customers. And we pick the vehicle based on the customers we carry, but also how many miles that vehicle travels throughout the day. And so as we design the system, we're looking at those miles and likely demand and thinking about what vehicle we'll need into the future. So some of it is vehicles in the 20 to 30 foot range. Some of it is electric vehicles. I'm very excited about the first delivery of electric buses that we'll have in 2020. We are working as we speak to begin electrifying our Brentwood Metro bus facility. That will receive our first 2 delivery of buses. And as we replace our fleet, it's about a 15th every year, you'll begin to see more and more electric buses enter our marketplace. So really excited about that. You'll also see branding that is specific, more vivid and vibrant. At the same time we launch Metro Reimagined, we're going to replace all of our over 5,000 bus stop signs in Missouri. We're in the design process right now. I'm super excited about the design of these new bus stops. When I came to St. Louis 12 years ago to join the Metro team, I thought, why do they have these blue and gray bus stops? It's like a secret service. You can't see it. It doesn't tell you a lot. So our new stops will be vivid. They will give you meaningful information and also connect you with ways you can get info like next bus time and trip planning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The vehicles, as we acquire them, will also carry a new brand. We love our red, white, and blue image and our Metro M, but you're going to see us pivot from that just a little bit, and I hope you like what you see. So as we move through implementation, again, we're taking comments really through the end of this calendar year into early January. We've got to arrive on that plan by March, because at the beginning of March, Lance and his team are going to assign all of those 5,000 bus stops to a route and begin the process of creating the plan to implement the signage updates, because we can't install all 5,000 signs the night before the service change. That would be a Herculean effort. So it's a many-month march toward this point. There will be a lot of customer information beginning in spring, not engagement. At this time, we'll be pushing info out about what is happening to your system and your trip and when. So we'll have street teams out within the communities. We aim to not take anyone by surprise. Most of the changes are going to happen in one change in fall of 19. After that, we'll be implementing some modifications in those community mobility areas. But the magnitude of change we're proposing, especially within our existing resources, requires that we do it all at once, because we're shuffling the entire deck and redeploying it. Okay, I hope you have questions or reactions. So the creation of transit infrastructure in places like the community mobility hubs can be accomplished within those communities. One thing the city of St. Anne has done is they've created a transportation development district, and they're investing in infrastructure. That includes resurfacing some of the roads that they have, but they're also investing in major bus stops. They have worked in concert with Bi-State Development and with Metro on that project. This is relatively light lifting within a community. Now, if we were to, as Metro, undertake that at our, even 10% of our 5,000 bus stops, that becomes a huge lift. But if we can work together to identify those priorities And West Florissant is a fantastic example of a great opportunity. We've got a strong business core there that's already working to make streetscape improvements through the county's proposed Great Streets project. We're proposing 15-minute service all day, every day on the West Florissant corridor. We're anchoring that in the north with North County Transit Center and Civic Center Transit Center in the south, but we need those destinations along the corridor. So yes, I would love to see more of that too. And Jessica, Liza from Bi-State's Economic Development Team, or I, would be happy to have conversations with you to talk about how that might be accomplished within your service area or community. Fortunately, we're not alone in exploring these solutions. We have been learning a great deal, in part from the tech firms that are operating this area, but more importantly from our peers in the transit industry. We've talked to about 10 peer systems that have implemented some form of microtransit, and we're learning from them. What we envision for microtransit would include a telephone-based dispatch, and we know through our market research that most of our customers have access to a telephone. It doesn't have to be a smartphone, it could be a landline, where they would call one of our dispatch centers. So we have personnel available to make that connection between the microtransit vehicle and the customer. Payment could be electronic via a mobile payment using your cell phone in a bank, via a smart card, which we have just rolled out the publicly available smart cards, by the way, at our 8th and Pine Metro Ride store, or it could be cash. So for our unbanked customers, within fixed route and microtransit, we don't see cash going away, and we have to make that service accessible to someone with just a phone call. We've been having conversations this week about the North Side, South Side Transit-Oriented Development Study, and we've identified 3 different pilot sites for that where we would like to begin creating infrastructure and development that is supportive of transit in communities today and really makes those communities ready for light rail expansion and green space and parks within those in partnership with MSD is something we identified as a strategy. But on a smaller scale, that can also be accomplished at these community mobility hubs. So you'll be hearing from Jessica Gershman and I. So I'll take the community mobility and then the microtransit. So the community mobility hubs would be similar to a bus stop, an enhanced bus stop. At a major intersection today, we typically have 4 stops, 1 in each direction of travel on each road, right? So instead, we would concentrate those stops. So you would have a near side and a far side stop together. So you've got 2 intersections. I would envision the investments being linear along the street so that they're facing the street and along the curb. We would probably have a little bit bigger zone than a typical bus stop, which today is about 60 feet, by the way, to allow space for transit vehicles and other vehicles as well. The signage and information would be shared between transit and other modes. And then there would need to be some orientation so that it doesn't feel like a wall from the community mobility hub facing the street with no connection to the business and development behind us. And I love the idea of integrating green space and permeable surfaces into those community mobility hubs. So think of it like a really enhanced bus stop that serves a little bit different function than what a stop does today. With respect to microtransit, we do intend to pursue lift-equipped vehicles in the microtransit service area. It's not efficient and it's really not equitable to have an overlay of different vehicle types within the same service area. We'd like to take it a step further. In some of our markets, where today they're pretty low density, low productivity, we're providing fixed route Metro bus service. So we got a 40-foot bus running around every 40 minutes. We got a 22-foot call ride van within the same market, and they're serving people with different conveyances, different vehicles, same trip purposes. What we're seeing in the marketplace, and we're having a lot of conversations with some of our peers, including KCATA in Kansas City, they're creating programs that are accessible to everyone. So someone who qualifies for a call ride ADA fare is riding that. They just have a different fare structure, and that's behind the scenes business. And they're on the same vehicle as someone who's just a member of the general public, and they're paying a market rate fare. This is especially attractive in places where fixed route doesn't make sense, like here in downtown, but also our low-density communities in Tallby within St. Clair County, where we have need for mobility, but we've got some low, in Ken, where we've got low-density areas. This hybrid microtransit and paratransit solution, there is something there. And we're working closely with our paratransit team in Colorado throughout this process to explore these solutions, considering the equity implication, the service demand, and the interface with the existing system. So I don't propose that we'll be replacing Colorado system-wide, but rather blurring the lines in some of our markets. And that just makes good sense, I think, for the customer as well as for the bottom line. These purple routes would have time points. These in South County would be limited service. It's not going to run all day, every day. It's not an express because it's not a point-to-point directed travel, but we've got a couple of routes that operate on corridors in South St. Louis County, like Tesla and Ferry, where when we looked at the demand, in the last version of the plan, we had eliminated 2 of what you see. It's actually 3 purple routes down in South County. And we heard from a lot of consumers. We have a sheltered workshop. Heartland Industries is within the vicinity of one of those routes. So we know that there's a need for a fixed route service, but when we looked at the ridership, it's really very specific times of day, weekday peak period namely, and because those are driven by specific businesses. So they'll have time points, but they'll be limited service. And then Fenton Gravois Bluffs, which is this route here. Initially, we intend to operate fixed route there. I anticipate that we will go through the microtransit pilots, some of the fixed route replacement. This just didn't emerge as one of our strongest microtransit markets. We want to start where we're strong, and we need some successes out of the gate to make this work. So I envision transitioning that to something else. Fenton Gravois Bluffs is an area that needs transit. We've got a lot of jobs and some education institutions there. It's pretty low density, though. We don't do a great job of local trips, so if you're traveling within Fenton, that route's not a great option. But we also need a connection to our Shrewsbury Metrolink station, which isn't exactly close to Fenton Gravois Bluffs. So we're going to do a fixed route that's an adjustment from what we're doing today, and we'd eventually like to replace that with a microtransit solution. The gap in service, if you will, and I'll advance to that slide so we can see it. It's not huge, so for most people it's not in this plan. It's not a matter of elimination, but it is different, and it is a big change, and it takes a lot of communication and orientation. So the next 3 months, our approach is going to be one of engaging. We want to reach out to people. This is still a chance to provide input. I anticipate the final plan will look a lot like what we're talking about here today, but not exactly like it. So we're doing that through pop-up sessions. I think we have 22 scheduled starting on Monday. Now those are intended for us to capture our existing customers, but we also want to go to community organizations and neighborhood events and businesses. So we're working on that within Microtransit. We've engaged Vector Communications to assist us with that. This communication process, I've described this phase that's happening over the last year. It's really an ongoing effort that's going to continue through implementation. We're still engaging people about a month into implementation typically to get feedback on what we've just done. So it's a lot of informal kind of sessions. We'll have those formal meetings, but really this has got to be an individual conversation about how this impacts your neighborhood or your business or you as an individual consumer. And we are logging that and organizing that. Jessica Gershman, our manager of long-range planning, is next to you, and she's done a fantastic job of capturing that information, distilling it. And Lance Peterson, our director of service planning in the back, Lance and his team have looked at all of that information, have read all of those 1,000 comments, and have worked to respond to that. So you'll see a lot about this. Toward the end, toward implementation, it'll be street teams. It'll be boots on the ground, people out, saying, hey, do you know about this? This is coming. And we'll do earned as well as paid media in that latter stage.